right, everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 19 of Stone and Clay. We're here with Michael, Brandon, Scott. It's been a long time coming. We've talked about doing this for a while. Michael Scott is the longest tenured friend I've had on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We're working with about 12 years right now.
Yeah.
So I really am hoping this episode we can kind of get really weird.
Oh, it's gonna get super weird.
I'm hoping to get deeply personal.
Mm-hmm. I canceled everything tonight. So.
Yeah, I know. I canceled my whole week.
It's a marathon.
This is literally all I have to do this week.
I know you're on a little bit of a hiatus with the weird buzzword. We can use that. Not
with,
using it.
With
strange things happening in the world right now.
The sicknesses.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're back and we're just gonna explore who Michael Scott is, what he's about, maybe touch on our dynamic, the friendship, some things we've been through, some wisdom you might have for the listeners. You're a father of two, a married man. You've been in the sales world for coming up on 100 years.
75.
Our first African American guest.
Yeah.
Which is
That's
huge. Huge for we're hoping to get a boost in the demographics. We're hoping that our black listeners will just go through the roof after this episode.
We need it.
So if you could send this to any black person you know afterward.
Not politicizing everything, but all racists should know that you have important things to say.
Exactly.
I find you one of the most interesting and colorful people I know.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's with that being said, let's back it up a little bit. Let's talk about what was your very first impression of me when we intersected?
Oh, I hated you.
Wait.
Oh, is this going too quick?
It felt harsher than I thought it was going to be. So, but let's make sure we're on the same page of when we very first met.
Mm-hmm.
I recall it being at a Denny's in Provo.
Or an IHOP, one of those.
Yeah, it was an IHOP.
Yeah.
It was an IHOP in Provo, or Orem. IHOP in Orem, Utah, 2008.
Mm-hmm.
You instantly hated me. Please expound.
Well, there was of course, a female involved.
Mm-hmm. There was a handful of people there.
There was a handful
gathering.
of people there, yeah. And I think that I had invited a girl, and can we use names?
Sure.
Names okay?
Yeah,
Christiana Arbor.
Yes.
We'll say. Just for respect her privacy.
Yeah.
But I had invited her, and it's like you sat she sat between the both of us.
Oh, okay.
And like she's turning and she's vibing with you, then she's turning back, she's vibing with me, and I'm looking, I'm like, who is this?
Because I was just a friend of a friend. Our mutual friend Ryan invited me.
Yeah.
And you're like, who is this?
Yeah.
Tall glass of water.
God, I'm not going to be able to compete. I'll never be that tall. It's annoying. And so, luckily, we were sitting down. And then, but you had
wasn't as obvious.
You had a long torso, so it was obvious.
She could tell. Yeah.
She knew. She felt it.
Yeah.
But I quickly discovered shortly after this guy's obviously going to be an issue. And
this is obviously.
So for the sake of I'm a businessman, like you said. I've been in sales for a long time.
Yeah. I'm
not gonna fight with you.
Right. You're not ruffling feathers.
I'm not ruffling feathers. I'm gonna bring this guy over to my team.
Sure.
Well, why battle against him?
Yeah. When we can work together.
When we can work together.
Yeah.
And so and then after that, one thing led to another. We became really good friends, pretty close. I actually remember leaving. I remember that year, maybe just a couple months later, I was in the middle of midterms, and I got done with a couple of my midterms and just ended up leaving and coming down to spend a week with you down in St. George.
Cedar City.
Yeah, Cedar City, right? Yeah, I was in Provo at the time, and you were all the way down there going to good old Sue.
Yeah, just
So,
yeah,
yeah. And yeah, that's where, yeah, we got really close and had some, you were my bodyguard.
sure, yeah.
That was
All
great.
165 pounds of me.
Yeah, you're a great bodyguard. Great bodyguard down there. And yeah, that's where we just kind of hit it off
Yeah,
right then. We've been close ever since. And yeah, had shared some very awesome times together. So
yeah.
went out and sold together.
A
That was
disaster.
fun. It
Yeah.
was what?
It was fun.
It wasn't even about. I
It
don't
was.
e-
It wasn't. It was not. Certainly not about the sales.
It wasn't about the sales.
It
was
wasn't
about
about
the
the alarm.
25.
The alarm clocks we were
The
selling.
25 vectors. The only alarm company you remember besides Apex.
It was. We'll say it was a dark period
It was strange time.
in the country's economy for sure.
It was a weird time, the recession.
Yeah, it was.
But a
It was
great
summer
time,
of
the-
2009.
Yeah.
It was a dark time.
Some of your listeners might not be happy about this, but those were like on the cusp of the Obama glory years.
Right,
Those
that's
some
true.
good times.
It's true. Which we should probably mention. Michael's from Chicago,
Great city.
great city, and okay, I think we've painted a good picture of the inception
Mm-hmm.
of our friendship. I think it's funny. You know how you have certain people in your life that when you hear their name, you kind of associate it with like a time period of your
Yeah.
life, even if they're like still in your life.
Mhm.
Like for instance, like my little sister, I think about Danny, and I just like think about when she was like 10 years old. You know what I mean? I just hear her name and I go back to that kind of nostalgic period. When I think of Michael Scott, besides Dunder Mifflin, I think about 2008, 2009, listening to Panic at the Disco, listening to
Great alternative rock.
listening to
Yeah.
The Academy Is,
A little bit of everything.
driving around, trying to meet girls, meeting them.
We weren't just listening; we were screaming to the top of our lungs some of those songs.
That's true.
So, great times. Long road trips,
Long road trips,
back and forth.
going to different Utah towns,
Mhm.
visiting different girls. Yeah, it's a great time of life, and
Yeah.
and our lives have gone in very different paths, but we've stayed friends the whole time, even though we've had. I wouldn't say we've really had any major rifts, but we've had periods where we don't really talk as much.
Yeah.
The
I
dark
was on
periods.
a mission, Taylor. You got.
I'm not talking about that. I still can't forgive you for that.
What did I use my Mother's Day call for? Mother's Day and Christmas, Taylor Church always got a call.
Exactly, and it meant the world to me. But yeah, we've had some periods of, when we don't talk for 5 months.
Why was that? Why is that? I think it's life. Life
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
I think sometimes we're just very caught up in our own world, but part of it is we had a really good foundation of friendship,
Mhm.
and so you don't feel like, oh, if I don't reach out to Taylor, he's going to be pissed.
Yeah.
You know that, okay, if I'm going through some stuff...
We always end up coming back.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm going through some stuff
Mhm.
and I don't feel like reaching out, I don't feel like being lectured or receiving advice or some catch-up phone call, I know it's fine and I can reach out when I want to, when I have free time, and it's all good. It's all gravy, right? And that's kind of the art of friendship. That's kind of the poetic part about it.
That's the good thing about it too, is I feel like, because interestingly enough, because when you had Ryan introduced us,
Right.
and I think I've talked to you about this before, but I always wished that I was as close as you guys were, or as you were with Kellen or with Jace,
Right.
or whatever. It
Yeah,
might
like
have
my high school buddies.
been. Yeah, high school buddies. But after a while, as I grew up and I matured more, once my frontal lobe was fully developed,
Yeah,
I was a Rye 21-year-old.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barely. And I started to realize like how if I whenever someone asks me, even to this day, who's your absolute best friend, and the first thing that comes to my mind is Taylor Church. I've always like known Taylor. He's somebody who it's hard to find those few people in your life, and I can count them on one hand. Maybe two hands, honestly.
Sure. That means under 10 for our
Under
slower
10 for sure,
listeners.
yeah. That you can always sit back down with and pick right back up where you left off.
Right.
And I think that to me is probably one of the most beautiful gems
Right.
that we have in this life. And so that is what the wonderful thing about true friendship.
Yeah.
I can definitely agree with that 100% for sure. And so,
Yeah. I mean, funnily enough, we had kind of one of those moments maybe 3 or 4 months ago,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, we did.
When,
I got back from...
Yeah, you got back from California.
That was actually longer than 3 or 4 months ago.
Oh gosh, was it like 8 months or something?
That was like, yeah, it's been about 8 months
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know how much you want to get into it. I just thought it was kind of cool because you had been gone for I don't know how long it had been since I'd seen you. Probably around a year
mm-hmm.
or so, and you had gone into some darker paths.
Yeah.
Had dabbled in some dark arts.
It was probably way before that I started getting into my dark arts space.
No, I knew you had dabbled
You
in
knew
some
I
dark
dabbled.
arts. I know my guy. But that's the thing. It's like when you got somebody you're close to that's dabbling in the dark arts
mm-hmm.
and doing things that, and I'm not here to judge. I don't care what people do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you know that they're not happy, they're not living in a way that's making them happy, sometimes you just got to let them live,
mm-hmm.
and they'll come around when they come around, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah. But yeah, you called me and you needed a place to stay because you were going through some stuff, and I feel like I hadn't seen you in like a year and a half or something,
mm-hmm.
and you came over. We shared some Pringles and Guadana and crashed in my bed together.
Yeah. That was more recently. Yeah, so I guess that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's good times.
Yeah, great times is actually a great moment. And maybe for our listeners, tell them a little bit about some backstory behind that. When I was actually coming home from serving a mission for the LDS church, I sat next to the most incredible woman I'd ever met. And I knew right away that she was really special.
Yeah.
And that might not sound like much coming from me because
let me give the listeners some context. Michael is wont to fall in love quickly.
Love you.
If he likes you, he loves you.
I love you.
So it's a beautiful thing. Proceed.
Yeah. No, it wasn't always a beautiful thing.
Well, it was a gift and a curse.
It was a gift that it was my cross to burden.
It was your cross to burden. Yes.
my cross to bear.
Right. Exactly.
But so I knew eventually, from sitting down next to each other on the plane, we eventually got married.
On the plane.
That's how it happens.
I feel like you're skipping.
Well, he's a captain, so.
Oh, okay.
No. But we had been together ever since, and a short while later got married. Who was my best man? Oh,
I don't want this to be all about me, but it was
great best
it was
man.
me.
Mm-hmm. I wish I'd recorded what you said during that
toast.
That toast. I still can't remember. I know it was great. I know it had people laughing
and crying.
Yeah, it was great. It was perfect.
Yeah.
Absolutely what we needed. And so, and we've always shared like a very unique relationship. We are so 100% opposite.
Right.
And so, in so many ways. And it's interesting that as I've come to respect.
Just for clarity, you're talking about your wife, not me.
No, not you. We're too much alike.
Right.
Actually, I love you.
Thank you.
It should have been us. We should have gotten an apartment together.
Well,
no, I'm just kidding.
There's still time.
No, but I went to I ended up, uh, obviously, we had two beautiful children, grew together, and I just kind of got weird. I was, I'd always had an issue like with the whole, just growing up in Chicago, like even after, when I was 21 years old, I joined the LDS church, and then a couple years later went on a mission. When I got back, I got kind of stale, I think.
Yeah. You mean like spiritually stale?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like I started to miss the old ways.
Uh-huh.
And so I would start to, even before then, I would always, when I was getting stressed out, I'm like, gosh, I need to go roll up a joint.
Yeah.
You know, and I go grab and sneak off and smoke and things like that. And I would always, go to my ecclesiastical leaders and, talk to them through it. And they just, give me a pat on the back, tell me keep going.
Yeah.
That's a whole different story we need to talk about another time as far
Right,
as like,
right.
as far as how that whole process goes. I feel like there's just some type of disconnect really with it because maybe it's different in other places,
Right.
but here in Utah, I just don't feel like a lot of them even have very much experience
Right.
really dealing with that. We had a great bishop in Philadelphia who helped me a lot.
Okay, yeah.
Remember him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But great guy. Good
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
I can't remember his name like right now. In
Yeah.
fact, I think it started with a G, maybe. It sounds like a solid
Yeah.
letter.
Bishop Jeeves.
Bishop G name. But that slowly, just me, I started to realize, and now I understand looking back that I was using those things to cope with some of the other demons in my life or other things I wasn't ready to confront really in my life. But later on, it started to affect my marriage in a big way, and I started to have, even with two kids, maybe it sounds like a scumbag to me, but I started to doubt things a lot. I started to doubt, what I believed as far as, the church was going, because I wasn't practicing it, so I wasn't seeing all these incredible promises that were supposed to happen in my life. And, things with my wife and I were just very rocky for a really long time. And then I went down this path of, I wasn't faithful to her.
Yeah.
And that kind of went, and she kind of always felt like knew something was going on, but because we had kids, she was trying to figure out a way like to make it work.
Right.
And I would always, try to, feign progression when nothing was ever really there. And you can definitely feel it. And so we were on rock. We would argue all the time, and I was angry all the time. I was always so bitter and irritable,
Mm-hmm.
I think you remember how irritable I was.
I'm familiar.
Like even before I was married,
Right.
Yeah. And it was just because I had a big problem confronting what I was really feeling, and also being open and honest with myself and with others. It's hard for somebody to say, and I think this is really important right now, especially with this whole pandemic and everything going on, and the big, I know I got to talk about it, like the whole social distancing thing.
Right.
I think it's a problem as far as mental health goes, because you really see now a lot of people are having issues really being able to confront themselves.
Yeah.
And wondering how to really handle that. And that's something I took a really rocky road to being able to come to realization with myself on. It's interesting enough, I had a tragic experience that kind of woke me up to everything. And I remember this was, less than a year ago, going and telling my wife, everything that I've been doing, how I've been running around, just being 100% open and honest with her, just knowing that when it's all said and done, I won't ever be happy unless I'm honest with myself, I'm honest with her, and I bring things before, God.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where and it's amazing that all these things that I've thought that I wanted, that I was chasing after, yet running away from, and if that makes sense, started to come into reach. And now, just a few short months later, I'm sober. I have an incredible family. I actually start to realize that my wife isn't so different from me after all.
Right.
We both really do want the same things and we both value the same things, we're on the same page, I would be spending money all the time. Like I was always thinking, well, I'm making big money.
Yeah.
Like what is she worried about? What's she complaining about?
Yeah.
You know? So what, I'm away from you, 25 out of 52 weeks of the year,
Mm-hmm.
I'm making money.
Right.
Don't you like what you have?
Yeah.
And we were never really happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's, interestingly enough, I'm doing something different, making a lot less money than what I was doing before, and we're in a way better position financially.
Right.
We're on the same page as far as where we want to go on the temporal side of things, but more importantly on the spiritual side of things. And there's just a happiness that's there that wasn't there for the first 6 years of our marriage.
Right.
This is our we celebrated our 7th anniversary.
Yeah.
By some miracle.
Yeah.
like back in April. But she is just divine. She's the most incredible woman I know.
Yeah.
And she's my physical manifestation of righteousness and what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah. That's awesome. So let me ask you this. It takes an incredible amount of, call it what you want, call it bravery, call it courage, call it just audacity, but to get to that point where you're like, okay, I need to tell my wife everything that I've done, and I need to face the facts that it might be the tipping point. She might leave me, might take the kids, like this might be all over.
Mm-hmm.
Do I continue with the facade and try to just get better myself and bury it under the rug and keep moving forward? Or like you said, do I do the integrity move and put it all out on the floor but risk losing everything?
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through that mind space.
Yeah, I think for me, it was just a realization of everything that led up to that moment. And so to kind of, and I'm being just super, very open like right now. And hopefully it helps somebody in the future. I don't care what people think about me or
Right.
what they say or anything like that. But hopefully my story helps someone else later on.
Right.
But what happened with me was I was actually working out in Texas.
That's your first problem.
horrible place. It is literally the devil's butthole. No offense to our Texas listeners.
Sure.
But there are many, and they love Texas. They love Texas.
Maybe don't mention any specific cities.
Okay, yeah. Well, I was in Dallas, Texas.
Right. Dallas.
Dallas, quote unquote.
Yeah.
No, but actually I did enjoy Dallas a lot. It's a beautiful city. Lots to do out there.
Really, the state's too big.
It's way too big. I feel like
because when you're in Dallas, it's so different from when you're in Austin or San Antonio or some BS
or Lubbock
border town with Mexico. Like
it's the worst time.
It's too much.
Lubbock like West Texas, all that stuff is way different than like Central Texas, like Austin, Dallas, all that stuff. And so, it's definitely an interesting place.
Yeah,
for sure. But I enjoyed it for the most part. I probably enjoyed it for the wrong reasons, though. Looking back on it.
Yeah.
But I was actually leaving out of with my story where my turnaround came from was like this climax where I was at a strip club with some work buddies, and we were. I was just throwing money. And making
as one does.
You're supposed to waste money.
Sure.
Like that.
Yeah.
On Scandally Clap, people that you'll never see.
Listen, I've seen hip hop music videos. I'm pretty sure I know what you're
this
talking
was
about.
essentially it. It was I'm Kanye West.
Right.
Yeah. No, but I'm throwing out money there, and I think maybe some guys that have been watching me, and as I walked out, they ended up jumping me, knocked me out. I've never been knocked out in my life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is saying something because you've been in a decent amount of scuffles.
A decent amount of scuffles. I have never lost a scuffle. Actually, I lost one.
Mm-hmm.
That was to the starting defensive end of the Utah Utes. at a Gold's Gym
Yes.
because I
You got a little lippy.
got a little lippy playing basketball.
I think the main point to take away there is that he started.
Yeah,
That's
the
you're not
main
gonna
point.
get knocked out by some third string bench defense.
I didn't even get knocked out though.
Right.
But
You did not win.
I didn't win. I can definitely say
Okay.
I was basically a paperweight.
Right. Okay.
My first mistake was actually, I'm like, okay, this guy's coming at me. I got to do something. I can't run. I want to run,
Yeah.
but the wall's behind me.
Sure.
So I just punch him in the throat.
Yeah.
And he got angrier.
Yeah.
A horrible mistake.
Yeah.
I immediately went to a fetal position. Different story for later.
Right.
But I remember, those guys coming up to me out of the corner of my eye. I'm like in the parking lot, and they just kind of jumped me. And I remember waking up, as one does, hopefully after a good knockout.
Yeah.
I remember waking up and just kind of peeling my face off of the pillow. I somehow had gotten back to my room.
Mm-hmm.
My buddies had taken me back, and I remember hearing the distinct voice saying, "You could have died last night, and your progress would have ended. What are you going to do?" And that scared the heck out of me.
Yeah.
Because it was clear as day. I remember sitting up and looking over at the chair that was in the room, thinking that somebody was there. And it was like maybe at that time, like 7:00 in the morning. I just called my wife, and I told her. She answered. I told her, "Hey, I'm coming home." She said, "What's going on? Like, you gotta. Is there everything okay?" I said, "I'm coming home. I'll talk to you when I get home."
Yeah.
Came home, told her everything. What led to that point was me realizing the curve, where it was headed.
Yeah, the trajectory.
The trajectory, there you go.
Yeah.
Better word. Was me realizing that, and you've known me for 12 years.
Your trajectory's been a little
it's always been
a little topsy-turvy.
But I feel like it's always been kind of going down. Never really on the up and up.
Right.
Always kind of going down, if I had to be honest with myself now. And the biggest reason is because I don't think that, as far as maybe with the exception of one girl.
Say it.
Damn it, Chelsea. With the exception of one girl, was I ever really actually faithful?
It's a safe name to say because most girls are named Chelsea.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Oh, Chelsea.
Right.
You. Great song.
Yeah.
You said no singing. I had to.
That was Kelsey, though.
Yeah, I
That
know,
song.
but I always would change it.
I heard it, yeah.
That time.
Yeah.
I don't think I did one Kelsey. One Kelsey.
Most of us do at one point or another.
Real shot of life, that redhead. I can tell you that much. But
you were saying, with the exception of Chelsea.
With the exception, I was never really faithful.
Yeah.
And I recognized that. Like, I left. You and I know I was playing the game with the best of them, but I left in my wake just a trail of destruction.
Right.
Just broken hearts everywhere.
Yeah.
And part of it's just because, for one, I didn't realize. I had that issue like when I was in high school with a girl I thought I really cared about, that I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
But I was just addicted to sex.
Right.
Yeah. And I would always go and find a girl who I thought was, prettier or going to do this or that. And but it was not very, obviously it was just me doing what I thought was normal, what most guys were doing.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't happen as much outside in Utah.
Sure.
But when I got to Utah, it was like, in Chicago, I consider myself like on the attractiveness scale, like a 6. Like maybe a 6, maybe high 6s, low 7s.
It depends on the neighborhood.
It really does depend on the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But when I got to Utah, I was a 12.
Because you were so black.
Because I was African American. And I just thought that because of my chocolatiness, that, girls were just more attracted to me, and it was ridiculously easy.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, look at his lips.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And so it was just easy to hook up, and girls were just basically always just throwing themselves at me.
Yeah.
Plus I played the part of the nice guy.
Yeah.
A little too nice.
a
little too friendly.
Suspiciously nice.
And so I realized and recognized that, the behaviors that what I thought was bringing me joy was actually just making me sadder and sadder and sadder and sadder.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I believe that if I would have kept going in the direction that I was going, I would have died.
Yeah. I
would have been killed, or I would have caught something.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that is one of the things that kind of made me realize, I can do something completely different now. And I can just, be honest with her and God, or because if she does leave me,
mm-hmm.
that's going to hurt, but she deserves to know.
Right.
It's probably the most hard. It's definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Yeah.
Was to sit down and have that conversation with her.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very grateful for where that has brought us to this point now in our relationship.
Yeah.
Just because, we had to go through, the fire together, and now we're starting to learn more. We're even her. There are things that she wasn't telling me about herself. Nothing like really so much bad.
Right, but you were both just more closed off.
Yeah, just very closed off, and it's amazing how once you start to say, you know what, I'm going to be as open and as honest as possible that I can be, how all of your relationships start to get better. It adds a whole a new level of depth to any relationship that you're in, whether it's work, whether it's intimate, whether it is a friendship.
Yeah. And
even with my friends, I recognize that it's like, man, I don't have a lot of really close friends. Like, why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Or I always have like a falling out with somebody. Like, why is that? And I realized it was because people on the very subliminal level, I think, mm-hmm. can recognize if somebody's being straight up with them or not, if somebody's giving them the very best of them or not. I think that's one of the things that's always like drawn me to you, like, is that I always knew that you would give me the very best of you. And that's what everybody deserves, male or female. And that's what I'm starting to realize now, is that I can't be going and, lusting after a woman or anything like that. I have to give people the very best of me, the very best version of myself.
Right.
And that's what's really most important, because if you can't, increase somebody by when you come into contact with them by being your very best genuine self, then you're useless.
Yeah, you're wasting your time. You're wasting their time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's really just sad.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly
sad. Great word.
Very small word, but
very small, but so deep.
But I love that idea of, because I think people nowadays people get so hyper fixated on like self-improvement, right? Which is a good thing,
mm-hmm.
but I think people like develop anxiety about it because they're like, oh, I'm struggling with this and I'm not as good at this and everything. Yeah. But if you can just have this philosophy that, okay, wherever I'm at in my journey, in my progression, and whoever I'm with during the day or whoever I run into or whoever I meet, if I can just give them the best version of myself, then that's good enough.
Yeah.
That's all I can do for today. And maybe my version of myself can be better tomorrow, but it can only be this good today.
Yep. That's exactly it. And I'm a huge, especially now with everything, like I realize like I want to get back into working out and like taking care of myself and things like that. And it's amazing though how when you try to, all it is people talk a lot about doing like the, doing the right thing or, making the best choices. It's just really about just doing the next best thing.
Yeah.
Right there. What's the next best choice I can be making?
Right.
And that really, when you give yourself a break, it turns into like I think one of the best things I'm starting to realize now that somebody can do is like you start to think about a lot of times, wow, I need to do this and I'm not as good at this and get better at this. Like we as human beings have the propensity to sit down and say, hey, let me plan this out. I feel
Yeah.
that sometimes people lack proper planning
Yeah.
to be able to really make the most of their time because you only have so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like as I've even become a better planner, and part of being a better planner is, like we were saying, is being honest with yourself. Okay, what am I capable of doing now?
Right.
You know, and then you bring your significant other into it. It's like, what are we capable of doing together?
Yeah.
Like right now, we've gotten my wife and I are doing a garden, and it started with just the ground, and now it's turning into a beautiful garden.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely incredible. It's a beautiful thing, something I've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I always thinking in the back of my mind when we moved into this place, we have this huge yard. It's what we love about it, and we'd always say, let's do a garden, and it take us forever and a day to do it,
Yeah.
to start it, until you actually just sit down and say, hey, let's plan it out. And so that's what I think what life is about is, if you say you want to do certain things, don't stretch yourself, but just work on one thing at a time, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Nice. Let me ask you this: You're 33, yeah?
Yeah,
Is that
just
right?
turned 33.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
In all 33 years of your life, you've lived kind of I don't want to say a wild life because it sounds pejorative, but you've done a lot of things. You've lived a lot of places. You've met a lot of people, had a lot of experiences. Your family life has been rocky at times.
Yeah.
What for you has been like a specific piece of advice somebody has given you that's really stayed with you over the years?
Honestly, probably the most, if I had to really think about it, and that's an awesome question. I really like that. I didn't study for that one. I was thinking, what are all the possible questions that Taylor could possibly ask for me? But probably the best piece of advice that I've ever gotten is literally just to, what we were just talking about is like to just, well, I think probably really to just be honest, just be an honest person, like what it means like to be a good person, and to more recently with things that I've been going through, and like is to forget about myself.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's something that's very important, as I feel more fulfilled and happy not thinking so much about myself, but by thinking about how I can bring value to a situation or a person, or a relationship, or whether it be work or whatever it might be.
Right.
And I feel that as I've done that, I've definitely had more fulfilling moments in my life. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Like it really is. So I feel like that's something that's just really important. Just striving like to bring value where you can, by just forgetting about yourself and looking to see how you can serve a person or a situation in the very best manner.
And just being wholly honest in everything you do. I guess my question then is, because everybody kind of since they've been a little kid has been taught like be honest.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it almost becomes just this trite piece of like moralistic advice, like you should be honest with your daily dealings with man, right?
Yeah.
But why is it
so hard?
Well, here's the thing. Like I think for most people, it's not hard to just like be generally honest, right? I think most people aren't like a mendacious people that just go out and lie to people about weird, crazy things all the time, right? I think most people are generally honest in their practices, but I think the question is how can you take it to the next level and be extremely honest with yourself, with your significant other, with your friends, with your family, because I think most of the dishonesty comes from omission, right?
Yeah.
It's not from you just fabricating stories out of thin
Right.
air. It's mostly like, well, I did this that I probably am ashamed of or embarrassed about, or just not in the mood to talk about, not in the mood to go there, and so
Right.
I'm not gonna bring it up.
Well, I think probably one of the big things, I think that there has to be some tact involved,
Sure.
because people, as naturally as human beings, like the first thing we want to be able to do is to protect ourselves,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? And so a lot of times people, and I know from my own experience, like, but a lack of honesty comes from just being wanting to protect yourself.
Right, it's a defense
It's a
mechanism.
defense, exactly what
Yeah,
it is.
you don't leave the house in the morning when you're feeling a little sick and tell everyone you see, hey, I'm having really bad diarrhea.
Yeah, you know,
Because it's like it's kind of embarrassing, like,
Yeah.
and other people don't need to know that,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And so, so I think it really is a matter of just being really thoughtful about and like you said, there's a thin line between, omission and what you should probably share. But every situation, situation comes up where you'll know when it's time you need to share this to add value to another person.
Yeah.
If you don't share certain things that you feel that you should, or be honest with things, you're taking away the opportunity to add value to another person.
Sure.
Case in point, I have a friend who she was going through a bad breakup. And she was just having a hard time as it came out that that the guy that she was dating serious with, they wanted to get engaged and all this. The reason why he was breaking it off was because he had some issues himself with an addiction to sex and pornography. And I felt like in that moment, that it was something that it was okay to share with her. This is what's happened with me in my life, and what's helped me, and what my thought process was. And so just knowing and understanding, I feel like those understanding when that time is, like how we were just talking about, like about when the time is to give somebody, it's always the right time to give somebody the very best of you.
Right.
But I'm not saying that somebody should just go out and say, talk to a stranger and say, my sex life is horrible.
Right.
Some of those things, it's best to keep between you and another individual. Like, I'm a big person where if I'm having, like, with you, because you're a good friend of mine, I'll tell you what my opinions are of somebody.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I feel like if I'm being honest with myself, it's more important for me to share with a person what my opinions are of them, because then it does open a ground. They might take that and they might reject it and take it offensively. I mean, you want to use some tact, where it is, but it's better if you're able to tell that person, why sometimes it concerns me that you do this, or so and so, because then now it opens up another channel to be able to connect,
right?
At a deeper level, versus just talking about somebody behind their back,
right? For sure.
You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah.
Okay, let me ask you a separate question. We're kind of diving a lot into your marriage, so hopefully,
great marriage.
Hopefully that's okay.
It's an American marriage.
Yeah. So, you touched on this briefly, but you mentioned how you and your wife are seemingly polar opposites.
Well, I'm black and she's white.
Right. You're black and she's white. The basic color scheme. They're opposites, but also you guys kind of come from two very different worlds.
So different.
Right. You come from Chicago. She comes from Mapleton, Utah. Don't know if you've ever been to Mapleton, Utah. It's not like Chicago.
It's
a little
very
different.
Not like Chicago.
The winters may be a little similar, but
even then,
cold.
It's cold.
But talk to me about how. And maybe this was more of an issue these first years of marriage, but talk to me about how two people that are so different and come from two completely different worlds can kind of grow together.
Yeah, I think, and sometimes I feel sorry for my single friends. No offense.
Sure.
But it's just because dating right now, nowadays, is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have these apps now.
Yeah.
Where if you just don't like somebody, you just ignore them.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
or if like you don't 100% agree on certain things, or if a person has a certain habit that you don't like, you're like, okay, this person's not marriage material.
Right. You see in their bio that they like Pokemon Go, and you're like, that's dumb. Swipe left.
Who's this nerd? You know, this guy plays.
Yeah,
You know,
it's very easy to dismiss people.
Yeah. Like, oh, what? He didn't graduate.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, he didn't serve a mission. Like here in Utah, you know, different things like that. Or, oh, like he curses every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think that I can. You know, and so I can understand having a value system in place. I think that's something that's very important.
Right.
But once you find somebody who you feel affectionate about, the goal has to be to one, I feel like it's about making the choice. There's too many people who are just very, I want this, and that. You know, this is my checklist. If it doesn't hit 75 to 100% of everything on my checklist, we're probably not going to work out. Probably
75 seems okay to me. 100's maybe a little unrealistic.
Yeah, but I think the real question is to ask yourself, does this person care about me? And do I care about this person? I feel like that's a good basis, like, to start. Sure. Caring about somebody is very important.
Right.
But then, like, you do have to forget about yourself for a second, how we were just saying, and find out how you can bring the most value to a relationship. And compatibility is really when that value is being contributed on both sides.
Right.
You know?
So it really has, at the end of the day, I feel like it has really little to do with like your shared interests and hobbies and backgrounds and whatever culture you kind of come from. Like, sometimes you think, well, it's easier to get along with somebody that is from the same place I'm from, who gets what I've been through. But at the end of the day, if you care about each other and you're both bringing positivity to the table, it feels like your differences don't super matter.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, is that if you are more concerned about the happiness of that other person, and it goes both ways, it can't be one-sided.
Right.
Like if like my wife, I know for the first 6 years of our marriage was much more concerned about my happiness than I was about hers on a more consistent basis. Not to say that I was just a jerk for 6 years.
Right.
You know, it's like you said, there's like ups and downs, but I feel like she did a lot more to contribute to the ups than I did.
Yeah.
You know, and so it does have to come from both sides. I think that that's very important. And so just when it's all said and done, like nothing else, it's amazing because my in-laws, like you've met them, like they are just so country.
Right.
Like, well, my mother-in-law is very, very hippie.
Yeah.
Like, but also still very country. And like, she's getting like that, and then my father-in-law, he's just, for him, like
they eat a lot of potatoes, is what you're saying.
Tons of potatoes, just everything potatoes, potato cakes, potato mashed, you know, diced, you know, sweet,
cubed,
all of those things.
No, I got you.
No, but perfect definition of country.
Yeah.
Not fries though, not big fry people.
Interesting. Yeah, that's more a southern country.
Wedge, they're wedges.
Yeah.
Wedge people, fried potato wedges.
Yeah.
Never got wedges.
Yeah. You know, I went to a gas station the other day, and they had, you know, those like potato wedges that have been out for like 3 or 4 days. They had a sign that said they were called potato logs, and I was like, oh, we're in that part of the country. Okay, we got logs over here.
Got some logs over here.
So
those potato logs, straight stuff. And Utah needs something that's like there. when you go to Utah, oh, have you ever been to Utah and got those
The logs.
you know,
Beaver.
he's making stuff up. They don't even know what they're gonna get. Like, actually, speaking of beaver, they've got great cheese down there.
They do have some fine squeaky cheese.
The squeaky cheese is
Yeah.
exactly where the jalapeno.
I feel like we're getting off topic.
We're a little off topic. What was the question?
The in-laws are a little country.
Oh yeah, in-laws. There you go. But my in-laws are. It's funny because I always had a rocky relationship with my father-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, I was like, this dude is racist. That's the only explanation I've got.
He looks racist.
This guy's got to be racist because
Yeah.
he should love me.
Right.
I'm awesome.
Yeah.
But again, as I've started working on myself and I realized how important it is to just forget about myself and add value to that relationship, I absolutely love him.
Yeah.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Like turns out we would go to sports games and things like that before,
Mm-hmm.
but then it was always like, okay, this was fun. I'm ready to get back. I can spend all day with him.
Right.
Now. And that's amazing how that happens when you do just forget about yourself.
Right.
And you focus on bringing the very best that you can to that relationship. It's amazing how that starts to change. Our relationship, the dynamic of it
Mm-hmm.
right now compared to where it was a few years ago, night and day. Like,
That's
I care a
awesome.
lot about him.
Yeah. You probably still wouldn't go like sneaker shopping with him.
Well, he would be horrible at sneakers.
Right.
Like this morning, I appreciate him. He's one of those guys who it's funny, you do start to realize the more you start to show love and charity towards another person, how much you do have in common.
Yeah.
And we do have like some of the things in common, but he is one of those guys who is just overly thorough.
Yeah.
And like this morning, we were going to pick up some dirt for our garden boxes. And so I went over there. I had to use this trailer, and the plan was to go over there and for me to just take all that stuff that was in his trailer to the dump.
Mm-hmm.
But you wouldn't know from their house, but the inside at least. But he's like has slight hoarder mentality.
Yeah.
Like
He's got a lot of knickknacks.
Like not knickknacks, like just things. I'm like, what is like? So you go into the garage and like when the garage door lifts up, like okay, nice, but it's a 2-car garage.
Yeah.
So you look at if that other side of the garage ever opened up, I don't know that anything would ever hold in, but you go in, he's got like boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And just boxes.
Yeah.
I'm like, why do you have so many boxes? This is an absurd amount of boxes. Yeah. And like he goes, well, you never know when somebody's gonna need a box. I guess that's good reasoning.
Okay, touche.
You shouldn't keep that many boxes. But then of course he also has just a bunch of, he's built houses and done a lot of handyman work. So he has random tools and things like that everywhere. He's got like 4 cars like in the back.
Yeah.
That like
haven't worked for 50 years.
Centuries. And we're always like, Dad, just sell this. Somebody will buy this old school Ford.
Yeah.
He's like, it's got and comes up with some excuse to keep it.
Yeah.
Instead of taking it to a junkyard. But then like this morning it turned into, I'm like, okay, that's good. Like, because lately my mother-in-law's been like, hey, you got to get some of this stuff out of here.
Yeah.
And so he's been having to throw stuff out and like he's been taking it over to the dump or whatever. And like this morning he just finagled away for me to get everything out of that trailer. He's like, just put it right here. Don't tell anybody. Just put it over here on the side of the house. I'll talk to Mom about it later. And it's like, that's something I would do.
Right.
Like if I had hoarder mentality, I would hide that from my life.
You'd be a finagling hoarder.
I would be a finagling hoarder.
Yeah.
And so
that might be the title of this episode, by the way.
Finagling hoarder, great. But he's I've come to love him a lot, and he holds I care a lot about I grew up never knowing my father.
Mm-hmm.
My mom got with my stepfather when I was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And they've been together ever since. And he's been a great man in my life. But I see now my father-in-law as just as much of a father figure, somebody who I can talk to, more so on the spiritual side of things about certain things. And it's turned into a really wonderful relationship. My mother-in-law, she's just very caring. I see where my wife gets it from. Like, she has every bit of her mother in her.
Yeah.
But she still does have the overly thoroughness too of her father.
Yeah.
Too. And so I'm always keeping my eye out for some hoarding.
Yeah.
Like,
When the boxes start to pile up a little
they
bit.
start to pile up, like, honey, what's going on in here?
Why are we storing things on the stairs?
Like,
well, there's not really room anywhere else.
yeah, well, we can't do that. But yeah.
That's great. Those are really good insights.
Mhm.
All right, I just want to ask you a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Have you found?
We can go on forever
This will be
if we wanted
a
to.
9-hour episode.
Marathon.
Have you found any moments, like, obviously things are different in Utah than they would be in Chicago or in Mississippi or Texas or whatever, but have you found any prejudice with being in a mixed race marriage? Any kind of uncomfortable moments or pushback?
Honestly, like, in Utah, not so much that I know of.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Because sometimes people still, like, they're weird, they act funny.
Yeah.
And you can't really put a finger on it why.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily always believe that, that's, because this person's racist. But
It's, to me, real quick, I think a lot of times, especially in small towns and more rural areas, it's not necessarily like blatant racism as much as it is just a lack of exposure.
Yeah.
They're like, what is this?
I remember one time Ryan and I were whipping through Annabella.
real quick. About 15 minutes before you came over, I was texting Ryan. I was saying, hey, Michael's going to come be on the podcast. He's like, bring up when he was riding through Annabella. So go ahead.
That's so great. But I was whipping through Annabella, Utah, and
we're talking population maybe 300.
That's pushing it.
But they got some outskirts.
I don't know that there's 300 people at Annabella.
Well, I've been to the Wikipedia page, but it could be embellishment.
It's definitely embellished, hardcore.
Yeah.
Because if you blink, you'll miss it.
They're counting some deceased family members.
You can't just combine Monroe in there.
Right. They're just throwing in other towns.
But yeah, I remember we're just whipping through there, and we're like going 65.
Yeah.
On a 30-mile road.
Yeah.
30-mile-an-hour road. Probably more than that, faster than that, because Ryan.
Right.
He will just...
Well, and usually in a town like that, there's the odds of there being an officer are like zero.
Yeah, very little to none.
It's just if they happen to be like going back home or something.
And this guy had a nice police car, so I was kind of suspicious of him.
Right.
Because I expected, those old school cop cars.
Yeah, kind of like a sheriff.
Yeah, like one of those.
Yeah.
And he didn't have the hat, like the ranger hat.
Yeah, you expect a hat and
there's got to be a
officer.
hat. But the guy comes up, like, he doesn't even ask Ryan.
Were you in the passenger?
I was in the passenger seat.
Ryan's driving.
Yeah, Ryan's driving, of course. And the cop pulls us over, and he comes up to my side. And he doesn't even ask Ryan what. Like, he asked Ryan briefly, why I pulled you over? And Ryan goes, well, I think I was probably going low. Yeah. But you, what are you doing here? The guy straight up asked me. Like,
that's all he says.
That's all he asked. He goes, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, Ryan looks at him like, he's visiting my family. I'm like, yeah, I'm visiting his family.
Yeah.
We're down here for like the holidays. I think it was like Thanksgiving or something like that. And the officer like kind of realized, well,
Oh, that was maybe
I probably,
racist.
I was probably a little too like. He was like, "What are you doing down here?
Yeah.
Are you from around here?"
Right.
Like he knew him, but wasn't from around there. It's like, and it was just a very awkward situation. So the good thing about it is racism worked that day because Ryan didn't get a ticket. So whereas he should have,
Yeah.
or been arrested for reckless driving,
Sure.
like in any other place, I for sure would have been shot.
Sure.
No, but I don't want to talk. That's too bad, especially given the
Right.
current nature of things. I do, but I feel that for the most part here in Utah, it's been good.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, the people that showed more racism towards me in my relationship were actually other black people in places that we've stayed.
Okay.
So like when we were in Philadelphia, like my wife and I, later on, we would get looks all the time.
Yeah.
Like from black girls, like what's he doing with her?
Yeah.
You know. And
Why? Now I've noticed this a lot with black guys that marry white girls.
Mhm.
I feel like there's some resentment in the community.
Yeah.
Especially on the female side. Why do you feel like that is?
I just feel that, for one, like I don't want my comment like to be taken out of context or anything like that, but black women are strong and territorial.
Mm-hmm.
Like most women are pretty strong. I believe that.
Yeah.
But I believe that for the most part, black women can be very territorial.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking about a situation where the little different story. There was a girl that you were entertaining. We'll call her the Dark Knight. Okay. I remember we were like, I had come over and like we were hanging out and like I was like, we were gonna go somewhere. We were gonna grab something to eat.
Yeah.
And she had come over randomly, like had invited herself over. She's like, I'm staying tonight. She took her hair off and everything. And then like, she's like, so what are you guys doing? Like she comes out like in her robe and stuff. And you're like, well, Mike and I, we were just talking. We're about to go grab something to eat probably. She's like, oh, Taylor, you mind if I talk to you in here for a second? You're not dating.
Right.
Oh, she had come into town. She had come into town. Yeah. And she was just like, Taylor, like, I came over here, like, to see you. And, like, so you need to stay. I was like, well, I didn't know you were coming. And we were going to go eat.
And no one asked you to take your hair out.
and stay the night. Like, so, like, okay, I'll go. African-American girl, you know, case in point, like they can be that way at point in times. Not to say it's like that, you know, all the time, but I feel that there is just right now, especially at this point, and it's been that way a lot of times in history, not just in now in this epoch, but black women have always felt that they have something to prove.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and black men, it's the same way too as well. It's how it is. It's in our DNA.
Yeah.
But I feel that part of that comes from a wanting to own, you know, that space or to have control like over that space, and it's very prevalent. I mean, not to say it's not like I said before with like other women, but yeah, with black women, that is something that's pretty common. And even the guys will, you know, joke about you like, oh, you got a white girl, you know. But, you know, they're a little bit more like accepting of it.
Right.
Because they've dabbled probably themselves like too as well. But some it's my wife is my wife because that's who I care about and I love. You know, I've dated women of all races. Yeah. And that's who I ended up being with was my wife. Right. I thought I was gonna marry a Mexican lady because I love tacos. Sure. You know? Yeah. It's a given. Right. But who you love is who you love, and I don't think that race really should have anything to do with it. But it's just rhetoric that's been going on like in our media and our society for so long is that they want to bring like race into it. So,
Yeah.
and I believe that race is a factor.
Yeah.
I mean, in some cases, like you know about like this whole thing with the George Floyd guy with the guy in Minnesota and all that horrible, tragic situation.
Right.
You know, and now things like that they're starting to be recorded more. So there's always like an uproar. It's a shame any of the violence in black communities, like whether it's self-inflicted amongst the blacks themselves, or which unfortunately happens a lot.
Yeah.
Or it's inflicted by like the police.
Right.
But there's a quote that was once said. It said, "To be a black man and aware, or woke in America is to be in constant rage,
right,
all the time."
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's necessarily true, but there's definitely some truth to it.
Sure.
Because I feel that like mental health amongst blacks needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
That it's hard for, like, I know for myself because I pay for it now, but it's hard for a black man to go and pay for therapy because of the unbalance in for services being provided to, you know, black men and people of color in America, for somebody to go and pay for, you know, a counseling session or therapy on a regular basis.
It's not usually accessible.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so, like, you know, Medicare don't do it.
Yeah.
You know, and unfortunately, like in some areas, it's like they cater more to, you know, the white demographic.
Right.
And it's hard for them to, and even too, just because of the pride of the black man, it can be hard for them to admit and say, okay, I need some help.
Or to tell a friend, hey, yeah, I'm going to see my therapist right now.
Yeah. You get made. It's a shame like that.
Yeah.
And when something like this happens with the, you know, police killing, now blacks come out and they want to support one another. But the mentality, the idea should be, we should be supporting each other all of us, regardless if you're black or white, but more so like in the black community, we really do need to have each other's back by loving and caring for one another as if we are family.
Right.
As if we all, because somewhere down the road, like, we all came over on the same boat.
Sure.
You know? And so that we can't look at one another and to lift one another up, yet we expect you know, somebody like the president to do it. It's like, he's not going to.
Yeah.
He didn't grow up with you.
Right.
He can't connect, he can't sympathize, he doesn't understand. You can't ask him to.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't blame him, because I know he's only human. I do believe that he needs to do more to connect with others. I think he's right on a few things, and I think that he's wrong on a lot of things.
Sure.
But when it's all said and done, it's about being able to connect with those people around you in a more positive way. It can't always be like, you know, macho man.
Right.
You know, it has to be about like I've been saying, like, this whole time, just really bringing value to yourselves and the people in the community and all that around you. If you see a young man who's it's too quick and easy for, you know, in the black community, for a young man to get into a fight and they all get around each other and cheer on the fight. It should never be like that.
Right.
Like, you should treat it as if that, you know, you're brothers, and that's not where you want to go.
Right.
We call each other brother.
Right.
You know, but we don't treat each other.
Well, it's like if you had two biological brothers, and they're going at it, they're punching each other in the face. As the third brother, you want to break that up.
Yeah.
Because you don't want either of them to get hurt.
Yeah.
You don't want them to hurt each other. It should be the same principle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Disagreements happen, but there's like also this, you know, these secret combinations that go on amongst blacks, and it's because of like the bottlenecking of opportunities within black communities, and that's why violence and gang violence happens.
Right.
Because now it's like, which a lot of people don't know. Like as far as you're a history guy, you love history. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of Chicago. So right now, the south side of Chicago, night and day from the north side of Chicago.
Right.
Okay, so west side, south side of Chicago, just riddled with gang violence, and the reason is because when segregation happened, desegregation, blacks came to like their communities, and it was actually the politicians at that time actually said, "Hey, look, the black schools aren't doing as well because they're teaching each other. They're uneducated and they're teaching each other,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're going to now move all this funding, more of the funding to the black schools because it makes more sense because those schools are doing better. We don't want to waste it on these schools." And they were perfectly justified because of the laws at the time.
Sure, yeah.
And so what happened was, and then it was the same thing with businesses and being able to get a loan as a black business owner, things like that. And there were predatory loans and things like that where they were just shuttering businesses all the time because it wasn't fair.
Right.
And they weren't educated on how to make it work.
Right.
What began to happen is that the blacks and the Mexicans and people like that on the south side, they start to get bottlenecked, meaning that now these barriers and these territories start to come up, and they're like, "Hey, I got to go and make it on my own. So this is going to be my territory and my community." And when gangs started coming up, it's because the police wouldn't come down and police them.
Right.
So gangs started to police their own neighborhoods. But then it came into another situation like, "Hey, look, we need money. Let's bring drugs into the fact." And then drugs comes in, and then you have, all these different communities basically battling each other for resources, and now it becomes all out gang warfare, and it's continually happened since the 1960s, 70s up until today.
Yeah.
And so where it's gotten just even worse in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous how it is down there.
Yeah, I stayed in the south side of Chicago with a few friends, and
with the Parkers and those guys. Yeah.
And
where they live. Oh.
And Christian told me, he's like, and he was being 100% serious. He's like, "Hey, when we go out, just don't talk to anybody. Don't look at anybody."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay. And I've lived in some rough areas. I've lived in some sketchy parts of Phoenix. Obviously, I lived in Rio de Janeiro. Worked in Philly in some dicey spots. But he's like, "You'll be cool because everybody knows me and respects my family." But he's like, "But just don't look or talk to anybody."
Yeah. It's the truth.
Yeah.
Like it's just strange because it's like there's this. For one, if you're there now, you're an intruder in their community. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I stick out like a sore thumb.
Like a sore thumb. And thank goodness you weren't Mexican, because it's just bad down there between Mexicans and black. But I mean, you for the most part, you would just been robbed. They wouldn't have killed you.
Sure.
Like you just been robbed. Like,
Yeah.
They don't kill white people down there because they're like they don't want that heat.
Sure.
But that's sad.
Yeah.
That's what has that.
Right.
That's what the mentality is down there, because it takes a white person being killed on the south side of Chicago to bring police presence there.
Right, for it to make the news.
Exactly. Like
Right.
for it to like make the news and like them to want to do something about it.
Yeah.
Because then even now, the militarization. I don't want to bring up politics or anything like that, but like how police are being militarized down in Chicago, it's just probably needs to happen.
Right.
Like,
well, I lived in Rio de Janeiro for 2 years, and the police there, in the certain, problem areas in the favelas and the slums, they're literally a military unit.
Yeah.
And it's because it's an all-out drug war nonstop there, so you have to have that.
Right. I was in Mexico. It was like they're driving through the streets on these big old, armored trucks with a guy with gun.
Yeah.
Like AK-47 just sitting in the back. But yeah, I feel that there does I mean, I'm not a politician. I can only, use my voice as often as I can. I think it does start with us wanting to showing love to one another within our communities, because there are places, unfortunately, where there are around the world where uh, they're very happy and they don't have violence. They're not killing each other, but they support one another within their communities.
Yeah.
And I feel that we can definitely take a page from that, and hopefully, I think the only way that something like this is going to happen is when, some is really going to make a change for the better, is if God himself comes down and makes it better.
Yeah.
But us on an individual level, we can try to reach out and understand one another.
Yeah.
In a very different way, because it's for crazy how somebody will go and kill somebody just because they wear a different color, or they're drug.
They felt disrespected.
Yeah, they felt disrespected or something.
Yeah.
When they probably have a ton in common.
Right.
You know, and that's very, very interesting. I think it's, I think more needs to be done, but it's never going to be fair.
Sure.
It's not always going to be fair.
Yeah.
And we got to live with that.
Right.
We got to understand that though it might not be fair, I can still try to, be the best person that I can be. I can still bring awareness to a situation that I think might not be fair, that I might be able to tip the balances in a little bit better way. But I think that when it's all said and done, justice isn't mine. Justice isn't the justice system's. It's God's. And so,
sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Let me ask you one more thing, and we'll close out. Because we talked a lot about marriage and communication and honesty and stuff. Mm-hmm. I know, obviously, I'm not going to name any names, but I know a lot of people, kind of our age, a little bit younger, that are married and are struggling,
Mm-hmm.
are having a really rough time, whether it's communicating or, usually if there's infidelity, you don't really know about it as an outsider, but there's just so many issues that can happen with a young marriage. What advice would you give to a younger couple, in their 20s, that are just struggling to get along, or struggling to really be happy together, when at one point in time they were obviously extremely happy together? They were crazy about each other, and now they're just kind of living together, going through the motions. Maybe they have a couple kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think kids can be a good excuse to
stay together.
Well, yeah, but I think kids, oftentimes people use them as a crutch to not address their real issues,
mm-hmm.
and just say, well, we'll just focus on the kids and we won't worry too much about us. You know what I mean? What advice would you give people like that?
My advice would be just give up. It's probably not going to get better.
Just probably take a hike.
Yeah, just probably quit. One of you's got to run. No.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. No, honestly, because I've been there too as well. I think the thing that made the biggest difference for me in my life is, again, like I said, just having that selflessness. Is I love the scripture about charity, because I believe that it is the ingredients to the recipe for a perfect marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Where, envy not, does not, thinketh not her own, is not easily puffed up, that doesn't easily, I think all those things is not easily provoked. I think that those things are very important, because if at one point in time because the problem right now that we have is that there's this issue with the media, where it has to be chemistry.
Right.
There has to be, it's not about chemistry so much as it is connection.
Yeah.
And you have to work on connection.
Mm-hmm.
If the lights are out in my room, I can't just say, gosh, I miss having the lights on.
Yeah.
So I need to get up, I need to walk over to the switch or pull out my smartphone.
Yeah.
Courtesy of Viva Smart Home. Like that plug.
Yeah, it's a good
plug. And turn on the lights. When I need to manually do something to establish a connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just going to happen by me wishing or thinking that it was there.
Yeah.
And so, but we do live in an era where everybody thinks that chemistry is more important than connection.
Right.
Because chemistry can be there and then gone the next second. But true connection is understanding that there's going to be some work involved for me to be able to fortify what's going on between us.
Yeah.
If there was chemistry at one point in time, you can develop that chemistry into a connection. And I don't want to get like too much into like science. I think I'm not a science guy,
Sure.
you know, but like we know that, you know, everything that goes into, you know, making the lights come on in your house. So establishing connection in a way, a phone connection, an internet connection, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There's work that goes into that. It's the same thing with a relationship. If you want to bring power into your relationship, connect with one another.
Yeah.
And you can't connect with one another if you're not being open and you're not being honest.
Yeah.
You can't. And that's what's common, I feel like, in a lot of relationships, is very common in my relationship for a really long time, is a fear of what this person is going to think. Allow that person to process that. You can't control how that person processes what you're trying to say, but you can work through it together. If you truly love each other, you can work through it together. If you say, especially when there's kids involved, you owe it to them to give your absolute best to one another. Because we know and see through statistics, I know some people it's different, but in a lot of cases, unfortunately, if it doesn't work out between the parents, it's a heavy burden on the child. Whether they're older, whether they're younger, it happens. And that's the incredible thing about families, is that once you make that commitment to be with somebody, you have to, I think my advice when it's all said and done is to just establish your connection. Do everything that you can to fortify your connection and be relentless about it. Love, charity has to be relentless. It's not about stopping at a certain point because you think that you reached a wall. You know, love can power through and break down those walls. It does take two willing people, though.
Sure.
When my wife, when I talked to my wife about everything and we talked, she needed time to process some things. But I let her know that I want to figure things out and I want to make things work. She didn't instantly
want to get frozen yogurt with you?
No, no, definitely not. But, but what I feel is that it took her some time, but then she came with her willingness to say, hey, I've thought about this and this is what I want to be able to do. This is where it's going to go. Like, she let me know what some boundaries were that she had, and I respected those. And I think that's important too, if you're connecting with one another, you understand what each other's boundaries are. And then you have to respect those. You can't cross over into somebody's boundaries anytime whether you're married or not. Especially with men, us at times, like, we can think to ourselves, gosh, it's just not working right now. It's because you're probably not respecting what her boundaries are. Understand what those are, and then forget about yourself. Forget about wanting to break down those boundaries. And because some of the guys will be like, well, she's got her boundaries up, I'm going to put my boundaries up. It doesn't go anywhere. You know? But instead, what happens is, when you both learn to respect one another for your differences, now you can communicate with one another about your differences. Does that make sense? Like, I know and I appreciate that right now, and even my wife, she's still working on it now, being able to tell me what her feelings are on certain things, or what her thoughts are and opinions are, because before I didn't create a safe space for her to be able to do that.
Gotcha. And
so just being able to create a safe space for one another to be open and establish a connection with one another, because that's what love is. It's so very important. And it's made all the difference for us in our relationship, to the part where I was thinking, oh, the chemistry, the magic's just gone. I miss when we used to do this, and that. You can still do those things, but now it's not as, it's more molecular now than what it was, than it was back then when it was very generic.
Right.
You know.
Gotcha. Yeah, that reminds me, like, I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was telling me some trials he's going through in his marriage, and I just told him, and I'm not a marriage counselor, but I mean,
Yeah, he could be.
I mean, I
Yeah,
should.
I mean, have you ever been married? No.
No, I've never been married, but I've counseled.
Definitely counseled very well.
So, I told him, I said, listen, I know maybe little to nothing about marriage, but I do know if you don't address the issues you're feeling, and if you don't try to change it, then things will only get worse, you know? And so, if people can take a page out of your book, and hopefully they can, and realize, okay, I might not be to the extreme where he was with your marital issues, but everyone has their issues. But if they can decide, okay, this is my turning point now. I'm gonna make this turning point now instead of just hoping things magically get better later, right? Like you said, you just have to work on it, but you need to work on it now.
Yeah, I remember when people would say, like, you know, like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Yeah.
You know, and like sometimes like that just goes back to what I've been saying. I feel like I sound like a broken record. Like, literally just forgetting yourself, and it doesn't necessarily mean that your values aren't going to be met. They might not be at that moment, but if you're both working together for each other, it's going to work out. It's like or something better is going to come out of it. I've had situations where I thought I really wanted a certain situation to turn out a certain way. My wife thought she really wanted to turn out a situation to turn out a certain way, and then we both work on it, and we both come to a conclusion that neither of us thought that, you know, we'd arrive at, and it turned out to be a lot better. And so that is one of the beautiful things about it. But just creating that safe space to be able to connect with one another is just so important. If you're together, like you're worried about what your wife thinks about you, no, like, or what she's gonna say if I say this or that. But it needs to be a safe space. Now you're one. You're together now.
Right.
You have to. It's hard to, you know, contort and form that bond together. It's not something that's easy all the time. But the reward is just incredibly worth it. Like, that's the best way that I can say it. If you're willing to put in the work and do the hard things together, the reward is worth it.
And maybe it's not on the same scale, but I think the same principles apply in the exact same way if you want to fortify a friendship, or you want to fortify your relationship with your mom that you haven't talked to in 8 months, or, you know, someone that's a little bit estranged in your life, or somebody that you're close with but you just wish you were closer with, you had a depth that you don't have with them. Michael, thank you for your insights. It's great to have you. You're my guy.
Love you.
Appreciate you guys listening. Check out the episode. If you want any more info, check out the Instagram at Of Stone and Clay Podcast. Check out my personal gram at TaylorChurch44. You know, if you want to see what Mike's up to, hit his Instagram.
MBT Scott. I think Michael Brandon Scott is what it is. Right? It's just Michael Brandon Scott.
I think so.
Yeah.
A lot of pics of his cute kids, his beautiful wife, his journey. Appreciate your candor and your honesty, buddy. And check us. We'll throw out this episode on YouTube, so just check out my YouTube channels. Just Taylor Church. Just search Taylor Church, and you'll find it. And we appreciate you, and we'll catch you next week. There we go.
We did it.
They said it couldn't be done.
Hey, well, they knew it was going to happen.
They knew it was going to happen.
No way.